southern France, in a small peaceful town near Marseille. The house sits on the outskirts, surrounded by olive groves and vineyards, with picturesque views of the French countryside. Leo, 36, is an accomplished architect, and Isabelle, 34, works as a freelance graphic designer. They've been married for 10 years and have an 8-year-old son named Adrien. Pierre, Leo's younger brother, is a 32-year-old real estate agent who visits frequently. It was a Thursday evening, late summer, when Leo's world changed forever. He had always been a man of structure, someone who believed that if you followed the rules, life would follow suit. His days were organized: work, family, a bit of relaxation in the evening. He had his dream job, a beautiful family, and a cozy home, surrounded by the gentle charm of the French countryside. But behind the picture-perfect life lurked a shadow he never saw coming. That evening, Leo was supposed to attend a client meeting that would stretch well into the night. His career as an architect had been demanding lately, but Isabelle, his wife, had always been supportive. She often joked about how their house was his first project, given how meticulously he had designed it from the ground up. Every detail of their home reflected Leo's touch, from the polished oak floors to the wide windows that invited the golden sunsets of Provence into their living room. The house was a labor of love, and Isabelle had been his muse for every step of the process. But tonight, Leo's meeting was cancelled. His client, a wealthy investor from Paris, had to reschedule. Leo smiled at the thought of an unexpected evening at home with his family. He decided not to call Isabelle, hoping to surprise her with her favorite dessert, eclairs, from a small bakery in town. Leo imagined her delighted face when he walked through the door earlier than expected. The simple joy of their quiet evening together. The bakery, a small establishment run by an elderly couple, was on the edge of the town square. The scent of fresh pastries filled the air as Leo approached, and he could already taste the creamy filling of the eclairs in his mind. After exchanging pleasantries with the owners, he made his way back home, his heart light. He thought of Adrien, their 8-year-old son, who was probably deep in his homework by now. Adrien was a bright boy, full of curiosity and an eagerness to learn, much like Leo had been at his age. Leo couldn't wait to sit with him and go over his school projects, as he often did after dinner. As he neared the house, Leo noticed something odd: a car parked just down the street. It looked familiar: his brother Pierre's silver sedan. Pierre had been visiting frequently over the past few months. At first, Leo was glad to see more of him. Their bond had always been close. Pierre was charming, outgoing, and a natural flirt, but Leo never thought much of it. They were brothers, after all. Leo brushed off the thought. Pierre probably dropped by for a chat, or maybe to help with something around the house. He hadn't mentioned any plans to visit, but that wasn't unusual. Pierre was spontaneous, often arriving unannounced. Leo didn't mind, and Isabelle seemed to enjoy Pierre's company too. They often laughed together, shared jokes that Leo sometimes missed, but he assumed it was just harmless sibling-like banter. Opening the door quietly, Leo stepped into the hallway. The house was unusually quiet. He could hear the faint ticking of the clock in the kitchen and the soft rustling of papers from Adrien's room. Leo smiled, imagining his son buried in his homework, completely focused as always. He set the pastry box down on the kitchen counter and paused. There was something unsettling about the silence. The house felt off. He made his way toward Adrien's room, intending to check in on his son first. As he reached the door, he peeked in and saw Adrien hunched over his desk, his small hand gripping a pencil as he scribbled away. His brows were furrowed in concentration, and Leo felt a surge of pride. He gently closed the door without disturbing Adrien and turned to head upstairs to their bedroom. That's when he heard it, the faint sound of laughter. It was coming from upstairs, from their bedroom. At first, Leo thought it must be the television, or perhaps Isabelle on the phone with a friend. But as he climbed the stairs, the laughter grew louder, more intimate. A shiver ran down his spine. something felt wrong. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and Leo could hear the muffled sounds of movement. Unmistakable now, the kind of sounds that could only mean one thing. His heart began to race, and he stood frozen in place, unwilling to push the door open, yet knowing he had to. With a trembling hand, Leo nudged the door, and it swung open just enough for him to see inside. What he saw made the blood drain from his face. There, tangled in the sheets, were Isabel and Pierre, his wife and his brother, their bodies entwined. In an act of betrayal so profound, it took Leo a moment to even comprehend what he was seeing. Isabel's hair was tousled, her skin flushed, and Pierre, the man he had trusted his whole life, was there beside her, shirtless, with a look of satisfaction that turned to horror the instant he saw Leo standing in the doorway. The world seemed to stop. The room spun around Leo, and he felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under him. The box of eclairs slipped from his hands, crashing to the floor with a dull thud, the pastries spilling out in a mess of cream and chocolate. Forgotten in the chaos of the moment, Isabel gasped, pulling the sheets up to cover herself, her face pale and wide-eyed with shock. "Leo," she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't mean for you to." But the words stuck in her throat, and she trailed off, knowing there was nothing she could say to make this right. Pierre scrambled to gather his clothes, his face flushed with shame and guilt. "Leo, I'm so sorry. This isn't what it looks like. His voice was desperate, but even he couldn't find the words to excuse what he had done. Leo stood there, rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. How long had this been going on behind his back? He had always trusted them both implicitly. His wife, the mother of his child, and his brother, his closest friend. And now, here they were, tearing his world apart in the most cruel and unforgivable way. For a moment, the only sound in the room was Leo's heavy breathing, the weight of betrayal pressing down on his chest like a stone. He couldn't look at them. He couldn't look at the bed, the sheets, the room that had once been a sanctuary for his marriage. It all felt tainted now, like a lie he had been living without even knowing it. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a door creaking open behind him. "Adrian." "Papa," came the soft voice of his son, full of innocence and curiosity. "Are you home?" Leo's heart sank even further. Adrian didn't know what had just happened, didn't know the world he knew was crumbling. He quickly closed the bedroom door behind him, blocking Adrian from seeing the nightmare inside. "Yes, Adrian," Leo called, his voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging within him. "I'm home. Go finish your homework. I'll be there soon, okay?" "Okay, Papa," Adrian chirped and disappeared back into his room, oblivious to the shattered reality just a few feet away. Leo turned back to Isabel and Pierre, his gaze cold and unforgiving. "How long?" he asked, his voice low but filled with an unmistakable edge. Isabel looked down, unable to meet his eyes, her lip trembling. It just happened. We didn't mean for it to. I don't know how it got this far." Leo's fists clenched at his sides. "My own brother?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "How could you do this, Pierre? How could you both do this to me? To Adrian?" Pierre, his face now a mask of shame, shook his head, his voice hollow. "I'm sorry, Leo. I never wanted to hurt you." The room felt suffocating, the weight of betrayal pressing in from all sides. Leo couldn't bear to be in the same space as them any longer. He turned away, his chest tight with rage and heartbreak. "Get out," he said, his voice hoarse. "Both of you. I can't look at either of you right now." Isabel reached out, her voice pleading. "Leo, please, don't do this. We can talk about this. I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you." But Leo didn't turn around. "You should have thought of that before. Leave, now." Pierre was the first to move, quickly pulling on his clothes and slipping out of the room without another word, his face a mask of regret. Isabel lingered, tears streaming down her face, But she knew it was too late. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. With one last look at Leo, Isabel gathered her things and left the room, the door closing behind her with a finality that echoed through the house. Leo stood alone in the bedroom, his heart heavy with the weight of betrayal. The room felt empty, cold, despite the warm glow of the setting sun that filtered through the windows. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. Adrian. He had to be strong for Adrian. He walked down the hallway, pausing outside his son's room. Leo knocked softly before stepping inside. Adrian looked up from his homework, his bright eyes filled with innocence, completely unaware of the storm that had just passed. "Did you get the eclairs, Papa?" Adrian asked, a hopeful smile tugging at his lips. Leo smiled softly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I did, but we'll have them later. Let's finish your homework first, okay?" Adrian nodded enthusiastically and returned to his work, completely content in the small bubble of his world. Leo sat beside him, helping him with his math problems, though his mind was far away, lost in the wreckage of what had just happened. He knew that life would never be the same, that trust once broken was almost impossible to rebuild. But for now, he had to focus on what mattered most. His son. Adrian was his anchor in the storm, the one thing that kept him grounded when everything else had fallen apart. Conclusion. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of betrayal, heartbreak, and resilience. How would you handle such a devastating discovery? Have you ever experienced something similar? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories that explore the complexities of relationships and life. If you have any questions about the story or want to share your insights, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective.